Hello everyone, and welcome to my YNR Official 24 channel. Matt Clark's voice sliced through the thick air like a cutter. "You don't know the whole story, Nick," Matt said, leaning casually against the doorframe, a boo playing on his lips, but with an edge of malignancy that transferred chills down Nick's spine. Nick's eyes narrowed as he tried to undergird himself, but the dread pooling in his stomach made it nearly insolvable to concentrate. He'd known Matt had a dark band, a partiality for manipulation, but he hadn't anticipated that Matt would have stumbled upon commodities so deeply particular, so potentially ruinous. "What are you talking about?" Nick demanded, his voice rising despite his sweats to stay calm, the echo of times of pain and treason in every syllable. Matt's grin widened as he sluggishly unfolded the secret like a bloodsucker savoring the quest. "Nikki," Matt said designedly, emphasizing her name as if it were an armament in itself. "She's been hiding commodity from you, commodity, big commodity, that could change everything you allowed. You knew about her." Nick's stomach twisted, and the words, "Oh God, not her," formed quietly in his mind, a prayer and a plea each at formerly. His hands gripped into fists, but he couldn't look down, because the fear of what Matt was about to reveal was nearly too important to bear. Matt's voice lowered, heavy with imminence, as he leaned closer, the office's dim lighting casting sharp murk on his face, making his expression look nearly grotesque in its gaiety. "You might want to sit down for this, Nick, because once you hear it, there's no going back. Nikki, she's been hiding the verity about her once about opinions she made, opinions that, well, you'll just have to hear it to believe it." Nick's mind contended, flashing back to every moment he'd participated with Nikki over the times, the horse laugh, the arguments, the tender moments, the heads they had survived together. How could anyone who had participated so important with someone be so blindsided by a disclosure that hovered to unravel everything? Matt's eyes lustered, seeing Nick's fermentation, and he continued without pause, as if each word were a dagger aimed straight at Nick's heart. "You see, Nick, she's not who you suppose she is, not entirely. The woman you've loved, the woman you've trusted, she's been keeping secrets that indeed I was shocked to learn." Nick felt his knees weaken slightly, the room spinning around him as Matt's words burrowed into his brain. He tried to intrude, tried to demand answers, but Matt held up a hand, silencing him with intimidating calm. "Let me finish, Nick. You need to hear it all, every last detail. Only also can you decide what to do with it." Nick took a jouncing breath, his hands gripping the edge of his office as if it were the only thing keeping him tethered to reality. Matt began weaving a story that sounded nearly too cruel to be true, relating events from times past that Nick had no way known, moments Nikki had kept hidden for reasons Nick couldn't begin to sound. Each disclosure was more shocking than the last, a waterfall of backstabbings and half-trueness that painted Nikki in a light Nick had no way imagined. Yet despite the wrathfulness, despite the hurt, a part of him couldn't attune this with the woman he'd loved for so long. "How could she hide this from me?" Nick rumored, his voice cracking, though Matt's boo suggested he'd anticipated exactly that response. Matt leaned in, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial tale. "Because she wanted to cover you, Nick. Or perhaps because she knew that once the verity came out, nothing would ever be the same." Nick felt a surge of nausea, the room spinning as recollections of their life together collided violently with the new, unsettling image Matt had painted. He saw Nikki's face in his mind, soft, loving, familiar, and yet, now, each memory carried an undertone of deception. He wanted to defy her, to demand the verity, but the words caught in his throat, tangled with fear, confusion, and a nearly paralyzing sense of treason. The air between Nick and Matt sounded to coo with pressure, an unnoticeable line stretched tense, ready to snap. Matt, seeing his advantage, continued to press, each disclosure delivered with perfection, designed to wound, to destabilize, to make Nick misdoubt everything he allowed. He knew. Nick's studies contended uncontrollably, recollections flashing like lightning across his mind. Nikki's horse laugh, her gashes, her unvarying support during his darkest moments. Could it all have been a taradiddle? Could the woman he'd pledged his heart to truly be hiding a history so dark, so precisely concealed? He wanted to scream, to demand answers, to shake Nikki until she told him everything herself, but Matt's presence impended too large, his words too invasive, his timing too cruel. Nick's casket tensed, a sharp pain that sounded to illuminate each beat of his heart, each beat echoing with the implicit loss of everything he held dear. "Nick," Matt said eventually, his tone softening just enough to unhinge Nick further, "I'm giving you the chance to know the verity before it comes out in some way that could destroy you both fully. You need to decide what you're going to do with it." Nick felt sweat blob at his tabernacles, his mind floundering to reuse the alluvion of information, the disclosure that hovered to upend his entire life. He allowed. Of the family they had erected, the trust he'd placed in Nikki over the times, and the love that had survived every trial Genoa city had thrown their way. Could it survive this? Could he forgive the secrets, the deletions, the retired trueness that now loomed like murk over the life they had participated? The office sounded to close in around him, the walls pressing closer, the dim light casting long, accusatory murk that made Matt feel nearly monstrous in his gaiety. Nick's studies swirled in a cyclone of fear and unbelief. He wanted to lash out, to strike Matt down for daring to reveal similar intimate backstabbings, yet he also felt an unsupportable need to hear everything, to defy the reality of Nikki's secret head-on, indeed if it destroyed him. His hands shook as he reached for his president, trying to undergird himself, but the verity, raw and jagged, had formerly begun to erode the foundation of his certainty. I need to hear it all," Nick eventually said, his voice a strangled tale, heavy with dread. Matt's boo widened, triumphant, as if he'd been staying for this moment, savoring the fear in Nick's eyes. Sluggishly, designedly, he began to relate the involved web of Nikki's history, the choices she had made in her youth, the retired alliances, the offerings, and the falsehoods she had spun in the name of love, protection, or maybe tone preservation. Each disclosure felt like a hammer blow to Nick's soul, each word a sharp memorial that the woman he'd loved so fully had been guarding trueness that indeed he, her closest confidant, had no way known. The shock, the unbelief, the inviting sense of helplessness hovered to crush Nick entirely. He wanted to roar, to demand answers directly from Nikki, but the reality of Matt's manipulations held him interned, embedded to the spot by fear, wrathfulness, and a nearly unsupportable sense of treason. He could feel the weight of the once pressing down on him, the times of participated life suddenly reframed in a new, harsher light. And yet, beneath the fear and the mistrustfulness, there was a flicker of commodity additional, a stubborn, flexible thread of love and hope that refused to be extinguished. Nick's mind contended, trying to attune the Nikki he'd always known with the Nikki Matt had painted, a woman able of secretiveness, of deception, but also able of love, adaptability, and remission. He realized that the road ahead would not be easy, that the choices he faced were agonizing and complex, but also that he couldn't simply abandon the woman he loved without understanding her verity firsthand. He demanded answers, demanded to hear Nikki's side of the story, and demanded to defy the involved mess of one's opinions and hidden motives before he could begin to make sense of it all. Nick's hands gripped the edge of his office so tightly that his knuckles paled, the room around him a blur as Matt's final words dallied in the air like a bane. "Flashback, Nick," Matt said, his voice a low, menacing tale. "The verity changes everything, and once you know it, there's no going back." Nick exhaled shakily, his mind spinning, heart racing, body tense with the knowledge that his life and his relationship with Nikki would no way be the same. He felt the weight of history, of love, of treason, pressing down on him, hanging to collapse the precisely constructed life he'd erected. And yet, indeed in the face of inviting fear, indeed as he felt the sting of treason like fire in his modes, Nick understood that this was only the morning. The battle with Nikki, the hunt for verity, the attempt to regain what could be rescued, these were the battles he'd to face, no matter how intimidating, no matter how painful. The room sounded incredibly still for a moment, the pressure thick and stifling, as Nick tried to collect himself, to draw in enough courage to face the storm that was coming. And also, in a voice slightly above a tail, he murmured to himself, "I need to hear it from her, I need to know everything." The words, though small, carried immense weight, a determination forged in fear, love, and despair. Nick Newman, overwhelmed, alarmed, but unbroken, prepared himself for the battle that would define the coming chapter of his life, apprehensive that whatever came next would test him in ways he'd no way imagined. The office door closed behind Matt's retreating figure, leaving Nick alone with the storm of feelings swirling within him, the fear, the hurt, the wrathfulness, but also the enduring spark of stopgap that love, honesty, and courage could still prevail, indeed in the darkest of moments. And in that quiet, rough space, Nick knew that his coming way would determine not only the fate of his relationship with Nikki, but the veritably course of his life, as he braced himself to face a verity that could either destroy or redeem everything he held dear. Jack and Victor got attacked after Matt Clark broke free. Jack Abbott was supposed to be keeping Matt Clark locked up. But let's be real, Jack Abbott does not have some prison like Victor Newman had for Aunt Jordan. It looks like Matt Clark will get away from the people holding him. Then he will attack both Jack and Victor's companies. Victor Newman is having a time keeping Newman Enterprises safe. Kane Ashby and Phyllis Summers figured out how to make the computer program turn against the people using it. Victor is really struggling to get the program on track. Meanwhile, other people are trying to protect their assets by moving them or hiding them. They want to keep their assets safe, while Victor deals with Kane and Phyllis Summers Stafford. Nikki Newman is extremely upset about what Kane and Phyllis have done to Newman Enterprises. It is interesting that Nikki Newman did not seem to mind when Victor did the thing to Kane's company. Victor thinks that Newman Enterprises is too big to fail. However, Kane and Phyllis are doing everything they can to make Newman Enterprises fail. Kane and Phyllis are really trying to bring down Newman Enterprises. Victor and Newman Enterprises are in a spot because of what Kane and Phyllis have done. Kane is really not interested in talking things over. Jack Abbott is getting ready for problems because of the artificial intelligence. He has figured out that Victor has lost everything, and it is all because of the intelligence program. Diane Abbott is happy about this. She is cheering for the people who are not in charge. Jack Abbott still does not totally trust that nobody will try to hurt Jabbo, so he will be careful for a while longer. This would be a time for Matt to get out of jail. Winter is. It looks like Matt will have a chance to get away and cause some trouble for the Newmans and the Abbotts. They are really busy dealing with these computer problems, so Matt might be able to sneak up on them. Matt wants to take advantage of this situation and keep the Newmans and the Abbotts on their toes until they come back. The Newmans and the Abbotts will be busy for a while. Will Matt be able to get in some hits before he gets caught again? The Newmans and the Abbotts are his targets. Jack Abbott is worried about Matt. Jack Abbott cannot let Matt go because he knows what Matt will do if he gets the chance. Jack Abbott has to keep an eye on Matt.
Jack has two options with this guy.
He can keep him locked up. He can hand him over to the police. Matt has a reason to go after Jack and the other guy too. Victor could kidnap Matt, then let him go after Jabbo. Victor could make a deal with Matt to leave Newman Enterprises alone. The question is, will Matt keep his end of the deal with Victor? Victor has to choose between two options. Victor is not always right. A lot of people do not want to work with Matt because it is usually an idea. Will Victor be careless enough to try? Jack Abbott and Victor Newman set up themselves on the entering end of an intimidating and unanticipated attack, all because Matt Clark had slipped through the cracks yet again, transferring ripples of fear and fury through every corner of their lives. The day had begun deceptively calm, with Victor strictly reviewing Newman Enterprises' daily reports, his mind formerly half on the schemes he knew would inescapably surface to challenge his conglomerate, while Jack, predictably, was rooted in his usual high-stakes accommodations at Jabbo, projecting the calm confidence he always applied as if nothing could touch him. Indeed, though, beneath that veneer, a storm of apprehension had been brewing ever since Matt's release from police guardianship. The megacity itself sounded to smell the pressure, the skies argentine with a hanging haze, as if Genoa city itself were bracing for the catastrophe that was about to unfold. Matt, ever the wild card, hadn't only managed to escape the strictest surveillance, but he'd also managed to communicate people from his shadowy history, conniving moves that only he could understand, and that would leave Jack and Victor scrabbling. As soon as the news of Matt's exposure reached Newman Enterprises, Victor's usual icy address cracked, revealing a rare, undressed fury. He slammed his fist onto the polished mahogany office, the echo resonating through the office, and barked orders to his platoon to track Matt down incontinently, knowing each too well that the man's cunning had formerly set dangerous bus in stir. Meanwhile, Jack, having been sloped off by Devon that Matt had resurfaced, wasted no time rallying his inner circle, and the generally composed Abbott was pacing in circles, phone pressed against his observance, speaking in cropped, critical tones that betrayed his rising fear. They were both acutely apprehensive that Matt Clark's return wasn't just a matter of particular vendetta, but a trouble that could unravel their entire conglomerate if left unbounded, and the veritably air around them sounded to joggle with impending disaster as they prepared for what they stressed was ineluctable battle. The attack itself came with stirring quickness, an unforeseen eruption of violence that neither Victor nor Jack could have prognosticated in detail, though they had tasted the storm. In a precisely orchestrated ambush, Matt had enlisted an unknown group of mercenaries, their individualities cloaked and intentions clear to shoot a communication, to assert dominance, and maybe to exact vengeance for the times of manipulation, lies, and control that had girdled him. As Victor exited his office to defy the disturbance in the parking garage, the first signs of chaos erupted a series of muffled explosions, and the unmistakable sound of gunfire shattered the air, transferring his security platoon scattering for cover. Jack, arriving nearly contemporaneously from Jabot, dived to a halt, heart pounding, as the metallic scent of gunpowder and burning rubber assaulted his senses. The two men artificially dove behind the only available cover, their minds contending through every possible script as Matt's unseen forces closed in with intimidating perfection. Victor, always the strategist, barked orders indeed as pellets glanced around him, his voice sharp and commanding, cutting through the bow-wow of destruction, while Jack, adrenaline surging, took stock of their surroundings, trying to gauge the scale of the ambush, apprehensive that every alternate counted. The bushwhackers were grim, their movements calculated, but Jack and Victor, hardened by times of battling adversaries both inside and outside their families, reckoned on instinct and experience to stay one step ahead, ducking, dodging, and fighting where possible. Amidst the chaos, the familiar faces of Genoa City's pious Abetans began to appear: Abby, Nikki, and indeed Billy, all drawn into the whirlpool by the sheer force of fidelity and despair, each taking their part in the defense, indeed as the odds sounded invincible. What made the attack particularly horrifying, still, was the intimate knowledge Matt sounded to have of Victor and Jack's routines. Every escape route, every caching spot, every contingency plan had been anticipated and reckoned for, leaving the Abbott and Newman bootstrappers scrabbling, replying, and clapping in real time. It came clear that Matt's vendetta was particular, fueled not simply by vengeance, but by a deep-seated desire to strike everything that Jack and Victor had erected, slip-up by slip-up, relationship by relationship, and heritage by heritage. As the assault escalated, it wasn't just physical peril that hovered them, but cerebral warfare, writing dispatches, transferred mid-attack, references to old backstabbings, rumored monuments of once sins, all designed to destabilize, to provoke, to drive them into miscalculations. Victor, who had faced numerous adversaries over decades, felt an unusual tightening in his casket, a rare regard of vulnerability that he incontinently masked with his hand-cold light, while Jack, generally more transparent in his responses, set up himself questioning his own judgment, wondering how Matt had acquired similar precise intel, and what other traps lay staying, unseen, in the maze of their megacity. Each movement came a delicate cotillion of survival, with the bushwhackers exploiting every weakness, every vacillation, while Jack and Victor reckoned on times of cunning, extemporization, and sheer force of will to counterattack wherever possible. Amidst the chaos, the emotional stakes soared. Victor's defensive instincts toward his family collided with his business wit, driving him to take pitfalls he'd typically avoid. As fancies of implicit loss flashed across his mind, the study of Victoria being harmed, of Nicholas or Adam caught in the crossfire, of Newman Enterprises crippled by this assault, transferred him into a feverish state of computation, blending instinct and strategy in a way that many could compete. Jack, too, scuffled with clashing feelings, wrathful.